So welcome, Tracy.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for coming in here today. Now, Tracy, tell me a little bit about you, your career, what you do, and your company.
Thank you. Well, I'm a solicitor, a matrimonial specialist at a company in the West End, a law firm called Grosvenor Law. We do a number of different forms of litigation, and I specialise in the matrimonial side of things. As a divorcee myself with 3 girls, I understand how difficult it can be when a marriage breaks down, and I think that that has helped me to develop my career as a matrimonial specialist, having the ability to stand in the position of a lawyer and understand the process, but also have the empathy and understanding to be able to deal with the clients as well, knowing what it's like to go through the process.
That was one thing I was thinking about you just then, positive judgment, that you seem to be quite empathetic. I don't know what the rest of you listeners out there and viewers think about lawyers in general. You know, we often put lawyers in a box where they're approachable and it's a bit scary, but you seem to have quite a calm demeanour and a very friendly, empathetic approach. Would you say that that is part of your business strategy, or is it just your understanding of what divorce entails and the process that you went through yourself to, you know, making you relatable to your clients?
Well, thank you for the compliment.
Positive judgment.
I think there are lots of very, very good divorce lawyers out there, and I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that you have to have gone through a divorce to be empathetic and understanding, but I think that it has helped me personally, and every client's experience is different, and it does help you to exercise a level of empathy from time to time because you have gone through the process yourself, but sometimes you need to park your empathy and be a lawyer and be very focused for the individual on the legal side of the process, because ultimately I'm not a counsellor, I am a lawyer. So people come to me for the law, and that has to be where you draw a line under levels of being empathetic and having gone through a process yourself and recognising that you need to focus on the legal element, because that's why people have come to see me, really.
Something interesting that you just said, that you're not a counsellor, you are in fact a lawyer, and to kind of add a little bit of light humour to the matter, a friend of mine said when she was going through a divorce, I just realised that time is money and I'm paying my lawyer to accidentally be my counsellor.
Yes.
And I'm chatting to them a lot about the cycle of grief and what I'm going through, and actually taking emotion aside, which is difficult, but practically speaking necessary, I suppose, when you're kind of decompartmentalizing what you own and all of that stuff. So could you tell us a little bit? First off, tomorrow is National Divorce Day, unfortunately, and what that means is that a high percentage, I think it's something like 42% of marriages and sadly in divorce, and tomorrow's the key day of the year in the UK for people to file for divorce. What is it about Christmas and the holidays that brings this about today?
Well, National Divorce Day is well publicised, and in real terms it's more like a month, because not everybody calls today or tomorrow because it's National Divorce Day, but it's significant because people have spent a period of time over the Christmas period with their spouse. Perhaps for the last year they've been thinking that the marriage is not great, or that the relationship is breaking down. And a lot of people are very focused on the Christmas period, family, friends, financial pressures, and perhaps with the hope that this is the final opportunity to get things right, to reconcile, to make it work. And the new year then comes, the Christmas period passes, and many people just either something happens over the period, or it's just such an intense time that they decide that they just don't want to go on anymore. And New Year brings new resolution. 7th of January is the first working day back in the office, and it is January, I think, is 25% higher in terms of the calls that we get in the first month. So there's definitely a period of change for people who feel that this is it. They need to do something, and they need to do it at the beginning of the year.
The idea of a new year and a new start, and really, I suppose the holidays is a time where you're compressed with your spouse, and
Yes.
the expectation of it being the happiest time of the year. That's what I'm hearing from you, and then sometimes it just isn't.
Yes.
And with the pressure cooker, if there's already cracks in your communication or relationship or whatever, they can appear, and then January comes out, and this is why divorce lawyers are very busy.
Absolutely. It's I might sometimes find that someone's approached me in the year before, but they've gone away, they've thought about it, and then they come back again in January having decided that that really is it, that they can't go on any longer. They've tried. They hope that Christmas might be a positive period of time when they were all together. And of course, the Christmas period, you don't have the distraction of work, you don't have the distraction of the school routine, of other activities that might be going on. And so it really is an intense period of focus on your life, the people that you live with, the people who are around you, their habits, how we all spend our money. And if those differences are irreconcilable, then that's when people just decide that they can't go on anymore. And of course, divorce is so much more accessible now and acceptable that people do feel it's an option for them.
What do you think about something that came to my attention today? Another stat, an unfortunate stat. Well, actually, 13 people filed for divorce on Christmas Day this year. Did you hear about that?
Yes.
How is this possible? Why does it happen on Christmas Day? I mean, is it the first time that people have been able to do that, to file on Christmas Day?
I thought the more interesting stat actually was that 77 people filed or filled out the application online on New Year's Day. So both days obviously are very significant, yes. and it's actually terribly sad. But I think it's recognition that people just can't go on any longer, and perhaps if someone's feeling trapped or desperate to resolve a situation, that they need to go through that process at that particular time on that particular day to just in their own mind say, that's it, enough, I'm done.
So as a divorce lawyer, what does National Divorce Day look like for you? And what does January look like?
It's very busy, is the reality of January for most divorce practices. Not only do you have your existing cases which have gone throughout the year previously, but you have people contacting you, and levels of phone calls coming in would be much higher. People asking what the process looks like in real terms, whether they can book to come and see you, how much it's going to cost, what the potential outcomes are, and talking a lot about children, obviously, because that's a big concern for a lot of people. So there's a lot of client management time at this time of year when people are just feeling their way, having decided perhaps that they want to get divorced, going through the process of assessing whether they want to mediate or whether they want to go through the formal legal process and who they're going to instruct. So
do you have, having, your own personal story that's relative to this month, let alone tomorrow, is there anything that you would advise people to consider before taking that huge step and filing for finalising their marriage? What would you suggest?
Yes, I think that there would be a couple of points that I would advise. The first thing is to just really take a step back. If you've had a difficult Christmas and the New Year period, you might be feeling intensely like you need to escape. But I would suggest that you take a step back and decide if your marriage is really over rather than having a knee-jerk reaction. Then if you are going to divorce, just think about the timings, think about the people in your life, like the children, or other family members that you need to consider. Is this the right time? Even if you've decided that you need to do it, are there reasons, exams or interviews or pressures that other people have? If the marriage suddenly breaking down is going to really impact on people. And then finally, I would say a big tip is, before you approach a lawyer or a mediator, know what you're asking. Know what your financial position is. Have a look at your expenses. Have a look at what comes in and out of your household. To obtain advice, you're going to need to understand, in general terms, what the matrimonial pot looks like, so that you can go to your lawyer and get advice that's useful, rather than go to a lawyer and be sent away and asked to do a number of things which you could have done before that first meeting.
So it sounds like there's an awful lot of groundwork that you could put in yourself to save time, energy, financial resources, to kind of get a grip on where you're at.
Yes.
And what it will look like going forward. Tracy, thank you so much. We'll be back after the break. I'm Sarah Louise Ryan. This is Love Lessons. We're talking divorce, National Divorce Day, starting over again in finding love, and what it looks like to be solo in the new year. We'll be back. Good. Feeling all right? You were so calm. That was perfect.
Good.
Really good.
How does it sound in the headphones? All good?
Oh, wait, are we still live? Hi. Tracy's not nervous for those listening in.
I was nervous, but once I started to talk, I wasn't. I talk too much anyway.
How's it in the headphones? Good, yeah? You
Yeah,
can hear each other
good.
great,
Actually, my headphones, for those listening, my headphones keep cutting in and out.
Do they?
But
Yeah?
it doesn't matter, though. It doesn't affect the...
Well, it's a problem.
Yeah,
it's the cables.
Literally about the cables. It's not about the cables, actually, the connection there.
They were okay for the last couple of minutes, but at first it can just be a little bit distracting. But
No, yeah, I'm sure it can be.
So next we'll be talking about the process.
Okay.
As much as possible, and divorcing with dignity.
I guess someone's there.
So I'm going to...
She got to be quick. See, I told you, once you start talking, it's fine, right?
It's not too bad at all,
yeah,
is it?
it's relaxing.
You were really great.
Thank you. I'm sure if my children are watching.
Sarah!
How many
Sarah!
minutes?
Huh? Well, I'd rather her sitting in her seat,
Yeah.
ready. Sarah, do you want to go?
Sarah!
Sarah!
We need you here.
Hello!
And the door.
Yeah, come in.
Zena, come in.
Oh, quickly.
Quick.
Hi.
Can you shut the door, please?
I don't go.
Zena won't be on the... We're going to be having the mic for Zena on this part, are we?
No.
Cool.
You want to grab a seat in there, Zena?
I'm not so busy.
Hey, come in, come on.
30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Radio. Oh. Hello, I'm Sarah Louise Ryan and welcome back to Love Lessons on Women's Radio Station. I'm here with the wonderful Tracy Rodford of Grosvenor Law.
Grosvenor Law.
Sorry, keep going to say Grosvenor. Welcome back. So we have just been discussing the National Divorce Day stats, and it is, unfortunately, in general, breakup season. The holidays is when people start to contemplate cracks in communication in their relationship, things that don't seem quite right, considering it's supposed to be the happiest time of the year, and the reality is it's not always the happiest time of the year. So tomorrow is apparently National Divorce Day. So Tracy is very busy in this month, but very empathetic and available to chat. And we would love to know a little bit about what is the process. So we just talked a little bit about doing the groundwork, understanding what's in the matrimonial pot, so to speak, and then they come to you and you decide to work with said potential divorcee.
Yes.
What does it look like?
Well, I think the first thing to say that often people don't realise is the divorce itself is quite separate to resolution of financial matters. So when people come to me, sometimes they don't realise that they have to go through two separate processes, and sadly, if they can't agree on children, sometimes it can be three. And I think it's important that people understand that the divorce process itself is a standalone process. It's called the divorce suit, and it's quite straightforward. And many people do their divorce petition these days online, as you mentioned earlier. And that's where they fill out the divorce, or as a lawyer, you fill out the divorce petition for them. And then you make an application once the divorce has been agreed for decree nisi, and then 6 weeks and 1 day later you can apply for a decree absolute, which means the marriage is over. But that, in a limited number of cases, is contested or disputed, and generally speaking, most good lawyers will try and get both sides to agree a divorce petition so that doesn't unnecessarily escalate costs, or in fact parties can do that themselves or do it through a mediator. What often becomes more difficult to resolve is resolution of finances, and indeed sometimes very sadly children, and who the children are going to live with and how contact is agreed. The resolution of finances can be dealt with in a number of different ways. You can, of course, try and resolve it yourselves, or you can approach a mediator, and a mediator will seek to resolve matters in a non-contentious way, looking at what there is and how it should be divided up, making sure that each party and the children's needs are met. If your case isn't the kind of case where you can mediate, because perhaps for many different reasons, there could be hostilities, there could be domestic violence, there can be any number of reasons why mediation isn't suitable. You have a couple of other options. Arbitration might be a way of resolving matters. That's engaging in a process which is not court-based. There's also a process called collaborative law, which again is non-court-based, which is quite a positive way of dealing with things, which avoids referencing your case to the court. The matters that sadly I tend to deal with mostly are where parties just simply can't agree. They might have already approached a mediator, they might have already tried a different number of approaches, and then they come to me and say, that's it, we simply can't agree, and I'm going to need a lawyer to represent me to take me through the court process. And that's when I would issue an application on their behalf, or look at where they are so far and see if it's possible to try and agree things for them.
Tracy, now we talked a little bit just now in a few separate areas about mediation. Tell me, I'm just considering divorce, let's say, for example. What is the difference between mediation and hiring a divorce lawyer? And is mediation the first thing that you should resort to before heading for divorce? Talk to us in layman's terms.
Of course. Mediation is definitely a process. You must attempt mediation before you go through the legal process. So when you first approach a lawyer, they are obliged to double check that you've gone through a process whereby you've attended a mediator who can advise you. And if your case isn't suitable for mediation, they will then send you to a lawyer, or perhaps advise you of how you might take the matter forward. But lots of cases are resolved through mediation, and many lawyers are trained mediators, so they will be able to look at the case and decide whether your case is suitable for mediation. As I say, there might be the odd case that simply isn't suitable for mediation, and that may be that there are domestic violence issues or other complicating factors that stop you from being able to mediate.
So thanks for that, Tracy. Earlier you mentioned a third part of divorce being complications if there are children and not being able to agree. So let's say I have children, and I know that you have been there before and gone through divorce, thought about it, and then proceeded to do so. What steps should I consider emotionally for the children approaching them, and then practically speaking in divorce?
The children and the resolution of the contact arrangements and how the children will split their time and who they're going to live with is often the most difficult area for people to resolve, because it's so emotional. There's so many reasons, emotional reasons, why people in the early stages are very keen to have the children live with them or maintain a level of control. And of course, it's absolutely right that both parents, and the court's view is both parents must have a role in the children's lives, because it's right that the children have access to both parents. And there are reasons sometimes why contact between a parent and children might be limited, and if they are, that will be a welfare-based reason. But in the majority of circumstances where parties are separating because a marriage is broken down and they simply don't love each other anymore and their differences are irreconcilable, my view is that, and my advice would be that people need to just think about how it will impact on the children and agree between them before they tell the children roughly how they're going to work out a system of the children feeling that they can manage the breakdown of their parents' divorce. Because for them, it's a journey. I mean, it's a journey for everybody, but it's a journey that needs to be managed by the parent. Now, it's very unfortunate sometimes that parents aren't able to put their differences to one side and recognise that they need to act in the children's best interest, because although you can take matters to court when you can't decide, really the court's view is that parents know what's best for their own children. And if they can put aside their differences on the divorce and financial matters and simply try and look at what's in the children's best interest, then they really are best placed to make those decisions. But of course, sadly, often people aren't able to do that, and that's when they may approach me about looking at how matters can be resolved through the courts. But I would always attempt to try and resolve matters if there's a sensible solicitor on the other side, by trying to agree things and working up, if necessary, a child arrangement agreement that can then be sent to the court and put into a binding court order if necessary, so that people do really stick to what they agree to, rather than getting cross when the finance is hot up and everybody's angry.
So Tracy, if you could put a time on it, on average, how long does a divorce take on average, and B, should we be putting a time frame on it to cap it off, to wrap it up and be able to move on? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that it's difficult to put a time frame on a divorce because everyone is individual. Every case is individual. Realistically, most divorces don't settle within a period of 6 months. If it's very easy to resolve, parties are entirely sensible, and it doesn't become protracted, then of course it may be practical to get it resolved within the process of the decree nisi to the decree absolute, which is 6 weeks and 1 day after you receive your decree nisi. But generally speaking, I tell people it's going to take between 6 months and a year. But I have had cases that have lasted 3 or 4 years, because sometimes people don't want to sort it out. Sometimes people get locked into the fighting, and it can take a very long time, or people want to go back to court again to vary orders. So it would be very difficult to put a time frame that fits all. It just isn't really that it doesn't really work like that.
With your latter comments, to me, it would sound like the ego is taking over in that instance, rather than, you know, just boxing it off and moving forward. It sounds like, you know, there's grudges and things like that which can hinder the process and hold people back from moving forward. Now, Tracy, I want to ask you, as a divorce lawyer, you mentioned earlier that you don't go through the grief cycle, but do you understand yourself what it's like? Obviously you do, the grief cycle of letting go of a divorce and how you can move forward. I know we'll move on to Zena later, but if you could tell me a little bit about your grief cycle, if you don't mind.
Yes, well, I think that I think they put divorce up there with sort of death of a loved one and moving home as some of the really big life-changing events. And it would be difficult to divorce without feeling the sense of grief, of loss, because not only when you separate from a spouse do you lose your partner who you've been with for any number of years, but you also lose your family unit. And I think it surprises people sometimes, even if they're the one who's instigated, that the whole family breaks down. But it can be a terribly sad process, and everybody recovers at different paces and at different levels.
Thank you so much, Tracy of Grosvenor Law. I'm Sarah Louise Ryan. This is Love Lessons, and we'll be right back. Sorry, I still had about 10 questions.
I was like, Zena, don't talk, please don't talk.
I had so many more questions to ask you, and I was so gripped by what you were saying. I didn't see